Social emotional learning has gained so much traction in the last couple years, and I'm incredibly excited about that. But I still find that we often have a limited view of what SEL is. And so when I initially ask people, how would you define it? Most respond by saying it's about building relationships. And you are so right. It is about relationships with ourselves and with other people. But I do try to help us get a more expansive and detailed definition. When we look at SEL, and this is the framework used by the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning Organization, often referred to as CASEL. When we look at their framework, we find that SEL actually has 5 competencies. The first 2 are self-awareness and self-management. Those are referred to as our intrapersonal competencies. The next 2 then are around social awareness and relationship skills. These are referred to as our interpersonal competencies. And then last but not least, we have responsible decision making. When we're working with organizations, they might say, Krista, where do we start in all of this SEL stuff? I firmly believe that we need to start with ourselves. Once we know who we are, how we feel, what makes us tick, what our strengths are, we are able to develop deeper, more authentic, more meaningful relationships with other people. And so when we look at what is self-awareness, what does that look like and sound like and feel like? We reflect back to CASEL, and in October of 2020, they redefined what these competencies mean. For self-awareness, most often people think about recognizing our emotions. What are we feeling? Maybe where did that stem from? How is that translating in our bodies and in our minds? But the other pieces are sometimes overlooked. What are our cultural and social identities? What do we have to contribute to the world? What are the strengths that we bring to the table? And then having a growth mindset, understanding that we can be successful, that we can accomplish great things, that it's our effort and our purpose and our process that we put into something moving forward that can determine the outcome. Oftentimes, this is referred to as having self-efficacy. When we talk about self-management, we often default to thinking about how are we managing those emotions? We all have big emotions at all times of our lives. But it's what do we do with those big emotions and how do we express them in a way that is kind and respectful and opens up lines of communication with other people. The other piece of self-management is about how do we set and work towards achieving our goals, even when we're hitting obstacles along the way. When we're thinking about then the interpersonal pieces, the biggest one here is around social awareness. And we talk often about developing empathy within ourselves and with our students. But what some people don't always realize is that empathy is a very complex skill that needs to have other foundational skills in order to be tapped into. So the first part of showing empathy is being able to take into consideration somebody else's perspective and understanding that you might have 2 people who, because of their backgrounds, their experiences, the way that they've been socialized, they're having different reactions and different responses to something that might be similar. The next step then, once we have perspective, it's listening and understanding, trying to uncover what it is that is behind that person's story. And then showing empathy is being able to relate to that emotion. So I've worked with teachers who say, I have a hard time with empathy because I didn't have that experience. And it's okay. You don't have to have that experience exactly, but it is, how can you tap into a similar emotion that that person might be feeling? And then we want to move our students and ourselves into compassion, which is kindness with action. So in empathy, we might be sitting with somebody, letting them know that they're not alone. And in action, it's what are we doing to support that person, or what are we doing to help break down barriers in society to take action and help others. One of the newer pieces here under social awareness is seeing how systems impact individuals and having an understanding of history and of the backgrounds that have led us to where institutions and systems are right now and how they affect individual people. When we talk about relationship skills, it's about how do we build those relationships with other people? How do we work in a team? How do we collaborate? What does it mean to cooperate? How do we rely on our active listening skills, including our speaking skills, including our body language? But it's also about how do we maintain those relationships, because naturally and inevitably there will be conflict. There is going to be sometimes where we don't necessarily see eye to eye. And how do we navigate through those times? How do we stand up for other people? How do we show up for other people? How do we respond when we're experiencing peer pressure? All of these skills fit under relationships and relationship skill building. The last piece here is responsible decision making. And I really do believe that we draw upon these four other components of SEL to get to responsible decision making. This is a newer piece here, which I really appreciate. And it's about being curious and being open-minded and wanting to learn more. Adam Grant has this great book called Think Again, where he says one of the greatest life skills is to be able to be open to somebody else's perspective, to new information, to compare and contrast it to what we already held as a belief, as a value for ourselves, and decide where it fits. To be able to sort through that information and make educated decisions based on that analysis. Now that is leading into problem solving. So it's not just can we solve a problem, but can we identify where those problems are? And then what is the process by which we decide that here are the different solutions, here are the solutions that are going to get me the outcome that I'm looking for. And then how am I going to go about making decisions to see that outcome come to fruition? Here, one of the biggest changes since 2020 is that we're not just making responsible decisions. We want caring decisions, ethical decisions, ones that are in line with who we are as individuals, our strengths, and and our core values, but also what is going to help the community and being able to balance all of those. Now, this is no small task. This is a lot of information. And we're all looking at why are we doing this? It's because we know that our society, our jobs, our professions are asking for these critical life skills. How do we know who we are and how do we work to our strengths? How do we manage our very natural human emotions so that we can work with other people, hear their perspectives, be able to bring the best of all of us together, to be able to solve problems, to be able to work ethically and caringly for our community.